Welcome to the bond with nature. So there's a book in the Bible called Numbers. And in the second chapter of that book, in the 8th verse, there's a couple of interesting things. If you're reading the King James Version, it reads Numbers 21 Verse 8 reads, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Make thee a fiery serpent, and set it upon a pole, and it shall come to pass, that every one that is bitten, when he looketh upon it, shall live." But in a more modern English version, like the New International Version, it's translated this way. Numbers 21:8 says, "The Lord said to Moses, Make a snake, and put it on top of a pole, and anyone who is bitten can look at it and live." So why are we talking about that? It's because the version of a snake in different cultures is either good or bad, but the snake didn't do anything to warrant that. Some say that there may have been inspiration for the caduceus, which in Greek is a mythology of a god named Hermes or Hermes. He is the messenger to the Greek gods. Now he had a staff, and the staff of Hermes had two snakes intertwined around it. And that staff represented opposing forces coming together in order to balance. That was placed on coins. In Turkey, it was used as a symbol from Sardis, which is now Turkey. And around 1902 in the United States Medical Corps adopted a version of this as its symbol. And in 2014, the Surgeon General received permission from the medical department in order to adopt a very formal medical corps AMEDD, or the regimental insignia. Today, the U.S. Army Medical Corps, or the AMEDD, looks like a pole with a couple of snakes. You'll see when you look at the symbol, there's a couple of different elements. Silver, being a silver shield, represents truth and valor. And this is what looks like the United States flag on the left side, and in the 20 states which were in the Union in 1818, which is the date that the medical department was established. The red represents courage and sacrifice, and the green also represents hope and aid, which is perfect for when you're describing a medical corporation, right? It's also reflecting the official association of the color green, which is used by the U.S. Army officers in the 19th century. Now, the staff shows what's called a rod of Asclepia, which is a green staff entwined with a green serpent. And this is in reference to the rod which was used by the Greek gods of medicine and healing. And of course, there's a rooster, which could be the symbol of a Greek god of medicine, moving towards the left, meaning you're looking backwards. This all symbolizes the department's motto, which in Latin is experientia et progressius. Now, I am not a Latin expert, so I'm sure I mispronounced that, but essentially it means experience and progress. So you look backwards to see what worked and what didn't work in the history, and you look forward to making that type of progress. So the rod of Asclepia, which is the Greek god of healing, is a single snake wrapped around a rod or staff. And the symbol of a snake shedding its skin actually represents healing and renewal, which is why there are some medical professions which have adopted it as their symbol. So why are we talking about snakes and what they represent in medicine? Because like any creature, it's neutral. It can either be good or bad depending on how you view it and how it's treated. So in one culture, it's a bad thing. In another culture, it represents healing and hope. When it's in the wild, snakes are something you probably should avoid. And if you're walking your dog, how do you tell your dog how to avoid a snake? See, if you're a human, you can use language, the spoken language, or you could use body language and just stop or pull them back if you happen to see a snake, because you don't know if the snake out in the wild is neutral or dangerous. And so you don't want to risk it. You want to take precautions, and so you want to avoid that snake. But a snake is just any other creature. But just like the balance with two snakes, it's important to be prepared for potential dangers if you're thinking about taking a long hike out in the middle of the countryside and you don't know what the wildlife brings. So Tabitha, of All Big Canines, has a training center in Southern California, and she specializes in training canine companions to thrive in rural environments or places with lots of places to explore. So originally she came from Canada, and then she has roots in the Coachella Valley Dog Club. And then she and her partner, who are best friends, wanted to focus on big dogs. And they got 5 acres in Sky Valley, California. And there they have a compound which tends to dogs and the training of dogs. So ABC, or All Big Canines, not only helps to train your dogs, but they also are very active as far as rescues with shelters. They want to help and offer resources in order to reduce the number of animals given to shelters, like the Esperanza Second Chance Sanctuary. These people are members of the Pet Professional Guild, the Behavior Education Network, the International Pet Boarding and Services Association, and the CCPDT, which is the Certification Council of Professional Dog Trainers. So they have a myriad of other types of credentials, including the IAABC, which is the International Association of Animal Behavior Consultants, in order to obtain these certifications so that you know that when you are working with them and a dog, that they are well trained and can bring current expertise in the latest technologies and training methods to make sure that you are the benefit and the recipient of that. So the IAABC certifies about 650 animal behaviorists across the globe. So this group offers dog training, dog obedience, rallies, trick training, and also service dog training, as well as behavioral intervention, which means if your dog is behaving poorly, then you can rely on them to help address it. They can even train a dog on IPO, which happens to be a sport which challenges dogs in certain levels of obedience and tracking and protection. So this was a sport that was originally developed for the German Shepherd. But it has now grown into a more popular sport for working breed dogs. And it was first held in Germany around 1901. And they have a variety of international sports and competitions. I believe IPO actually stands for Prüfungsordnung, which is a German word, and it offers 3 levels of mastery of the types of things that you need to prove. So whether it's navigating open, wide spaces or just learning basic valuable skills like tracking or herding, whether it's sheep or your own children, this is something that Tabitha can equip dogs with the right tools and can help you as the human to learn those tools in order to have that better bond with your big dog out in those rural areas. But All Big Canines of Sky Valley is not just about dogs. She also trains pigs. So if you happen to have a pig that requires some training, she can help you with that. Pigs are becoming much more popular as a pet option, but owners very often lack the knowledge of how to interact with a pig as an animal behaviorist. Tabitha can help you out with that. You see, pigs are intelligent and they're social, just like we are, but their natural behaviors can tend to be destructive if you want an indoor pig. So they might do things like rooting or show some element of aggression. So training really needs to be addressed to understand the temperament of your pig. Pigs need enrichment, they need space, they need to be challenged, and they also need access to things like mud and water in order to keep their skin cool. So training differs with a pig than it does with a dog. But if you have a training business, you might even think about adding pigs to your training business. But let's learn a little bit more from All Big Canines, or ABC, and learn about how to build a better bond with either your big dog that's going to be out in the rural area to avoid snakes and other sorts of bad things that might be out there in the wilderness, to learning about your pig and their companions. We'll be right back after these messages to have a nice chat with Tabitha. Welcome back. I think we have Tabitha on the phone. Tabitha, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much. But we are all really interested in learning about how you got involved with snake avoidance training for the dog. Could you touch a little bit on that and let me know what was what triggered you to actually start learning this and becoming an expert?
So I live in the Palm Springs, California area,
Okay.
and we live in a conservation section, which is the Coachella Valley Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan. And with that comes a lot of wildlife, a little more than I think some of our other rural areas would be inclined to have.
Okay.
And with that, we have a lot of people that hike. They hike with their dogs, they hike with their kids. And all of the rattlesnake avoidance type training that we had going on out here was actually rattlesnake aversion training, which is using the infliction of pain, fear, and intimidation on a dog to get them to stop going near a snake. And as someone who doesn't like to utilize those tools and knows what the risks of fallout are, my main thing was to find a solution. And this is not stuff that I've created. I just went to the gurus of it and learned how to implement it in my community, to create a way to teach the dog that is not only using learned disobedience, but also using scent. So we're teaching them the smell of snakes and what to do when they smell them, because they're going to smell them before they ever see them. So we want our friends to be safe when we're hiking with them. But we really want to make sure that we're teaching them how to actually avoid the snake and not just teaching them to avoid the visual stimulus or the close proximity with the threat of punishment.
So are you saying that an untrained dog would be curious and would want to move forward and investigate whatever that snake thing might be because it's new and interesting, whereas a trained dog would ignore that instinct and back away?
Yeah, a lot of times when snakes are moving, they're moving around very similar to how we would use a toy, and it can engage a little bit of their prey drive and make it really fun. And so, especially if you start shaking a rattle at them from the snake's tail, it can be extremely intriguing. So, we don't want dogs to poke their head in a bush to go, what's that smell, or what's that sound, or what's that movement, and get bit. So by teaching them not only about what the visual of a snake looks like, but also what the sound of the rattle looks like and what the odor is, and that all of those things mean go away from it, we do so using games and specific behaviors that we can teach them to turn around and walk away from.
So how old can a dog be, or how young should a dog be when you start this sort of training? It sounds like it's a bit involved.
It is involved. There's steps to it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't start a 10-week-old puppy on this, because you're teaching them specific cues, and then you're pairing those behaviors that come from those cues to the visual of the snake, the sound of the snake, and the smell of the snake.
And is there any other wildlife that should be handled differently than what the instinct would want it to do? I mean,
so that's going to be things like your rabbits, your squirrels, some of the birds that we have out here, desert
but you don't want to
tortoises.
avoid a rabbit, do you? Or
We don't necessarily want to avoid it as much as we want to avoid our dog chasing it.
I
Rabbits are
see.
very sensitive, and so they
Okay.
can.
So branching off out of dogs, how did you get involved with pigs? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
So I grew up in a rural part of Ontario, Canada,
Okay.
and we had pigs all over the place, and I loved them from the time I was a kid, and I always wanted one. And I used to joke that one day I would get my own house and I'd get my own pig. In the meantime, I had people come to me and say, "Hey, we have a pet pig. We need help training it." And there's no such thing as a pig trainer, even still, like in the sense of like going to the Pig Trainer Organization of America. To find someone. But we do have research. We do have studies that have been done on pig behavior. We do know learning theory applies to all mammals. And so I said, hey, you know what? Let's have them come to class. We'll make sure that we make it safe so that the pig's not stressed. They have their own space. The dogs are able to have enough distance that they're not going, what is that? And we taught them. And so I had about 6 or 7 different pig group class clients, and then had a few one-on-one clients. And then I got my first pig.
So, how is the training technique different when you're dealing with the temperament or a personality of a dog versus the temperament of a pig?
So
They
we all
need
know that
different
pigs
things.
like food,
Okay.
and that's how they get so large so fast. But pigs don't necessarily have the impulse control that dogs do.
Oh,
And sometimes we see
interesting.
like our dog mad dash for like a wrapper on the floor, and we're like,
Hmm.
oh no, that's not great. Well, your pig will push you out of the way to get that wrapper if
Ah.
they want it. So your delivery for your food needs to be fast. Your timing for your marking needs to be on point. So I usually have my pig clients practice their
Hmm.
timing before we actually start using a clicker or a verbal marker with the pig directly, so that we can actually get the skills we want. And a lot of the time that we start out, especially if we're already dealing with those behaviors where they want to just come and snack away or kind of climb up on you to get their food, we work on boundary games such as spatial awareness using a hula hoop, so that if they
Wait,
stay
did
out of our
did you say
general
that you
space.
teach your dogs or you teach the pigs to hula hoop? Is that what you said?
It's called a spatial awareness activity using a hula hoop.
Okay,
So we
just
teach them if they stay on the outside of the hula hoop, they get paid. And by doing that, they start to learn that there is a bubble around you and they can't just invade your space without you asking them to.
interesting. Okay, so you teach them a little bit of what's appropriate social
Yes,
distancing. That
exactly.
is great. So how intelligent is a pig? How do you gauge that?
I think if a lot of pigs and people got to spend time together, there would be a lot less bacon consumed. Um,
Okay.
because they are extremely intelligent and they're very sensitive. They're very emotional. They have
Hmm.
attachments that they make that are very different than how you have a relationship with your dog.
Okay. They have
Um,
loyalty. I mean, are
they
they
do. They bond with you. You become part of their group. They can still have their difficult moments where they're screaming because they want something and they're going to try to get it from you.
can you put a
Um,
leash on them and take them for a walk?
Yep, you can teach them how to be harness trained and how to walk on a
Okay.
leash and load up in and out of a vehicle and go to the vet's office for cooperative care, go hang out at the coffee shop.
So your desire to originally be a vet and then transition into being a trainer, how did that happen? Was it because of that need that you just explained? That you see that
Um,
there's
yeah, so I wanted to be a vet and I was working as a vet tech or veterinary assistant at a practice in Palm Desert it's been
Mhm.
closed for a while.
Mhm.
But the vets there were fantastic. And my first day working while I was in high school doing my internship,
Mhm.
we had to put 3 dogs down that were just behavior related.
Oh, that
And I
must have
had,
been
yeah,
traumatic.
it was. And I had a
Oh.
moment where I said, after we had several different behavioral euthanasias, which I didn't know that was the term for it at the time, where I said, we have mental health for people.
Mhm.
Why don't we have it for dogs? And that is when Dr.
Interesting.
Klages told me, I think that you need to look at behavior because there's nobody out here that's really doing a lot of that. And that would be a really great field to get into.
So
And then she,
so you became sort of a dog therapist, a dog behavioral expert, right?
I started learning how to train dogs first.
Okay.
And then as I got more involved, I changed my methodology as I
Mhm.
learned to do better. And through doing that, I actually got into behavior.
So do dogs get depressed?
Yes.
And how do you handle that sort of thing? How do you first of all, how do you identify a personality trait? How do you separate that personality trait from the instinct that's associated with that breed? And then what's your high level theory about dealing with any mental issues that that dog may have?
So whenever we have a dog that has a sudden change in behavior,
Hmm.
that's going to be a recommendation to go to your veterinarian right away because it's usually
Okay.
signaling that we have some sort of underlying medical problem.
Okay. So
Um,
fighting an
and
infection or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we look at things too, like thyroid disorders, seizure disorders.
Hmm.
Sometimes dogs are having absence seizures, and owners aren't aware of it.
Oh.
They don't recognize that those are happening.
Hmm.
Sometimes we have dogs that have kidney and liver issues or have pain. There's a lot of time that people go, "My dog's not showing any signs of pain." Yet your dog is starting to growl and snap at people more, or they're more withdrawn, or they're not
Ah.
wanting to go on their walks. And sometimes people observe that as being stubborn or obstinate.
Hmm.
And when they go in and they get a full physical exam, it's like, hey, we're having some sensitivities in this leg. Let's take an x-ray, and you find out you have some hip dysplasia or you
Ah,
have some arthritis.
yeah.
And once that gets treated, we notice a decrease in those other behaviors that are concerning. And it's because the dog had pain, but
Hmm.
instead of displaying it by limping or
Right.
screaming in pain, they're displaying it behaviorally.
I see. I see. So I mean, that's really sort of an interesting thing because I think as people have mental situations that they need to deal with and may not have the tools, and
Yep.
they have to go to a human therapist to learn those tools, you do that exact same thing for dogs. You give those dogs tools and you give their owners the tools on how to identify those things so they're not misdiagnosing things. Do I
Right.
have that?
And
Okay.
it's not our job necessarily to diagnose. It's our job to refer to veterinarians who can, but
Hmm.
it's our job to say, hey, we're seeing these behaviors, and what we want to do is teach them alternative skills, coping skills.
Right. Now, what are, but if you don't
We
mind me.
can teach skills and then pair with the triggers they have.
Right, right. So what do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about a dog who's misbehaving? What are your thoughts on that?
That their dogs are stubborn.
Ah, okay. So they're
I
just
think the
lumping
biggest
it.
misconception that people have is that their dogs are stubborn.
So they just are lumping it in that their dogs are stubborn, they're not trainable, and they're not understanding that there might be an underlying issue that's causing
Yes.
the acting out and
Or
stuff.
even a lack of motivation.
Hmm.
Our dogs are individuals, and so they are sentient beings, and they do have preferences.
Hmm.
And sometimes what we're offering is not motivating enough for the dog to ignore what it wants to do or what its instinctive need is to engage in. And so my job is to go in and help people see that
Hmm.
and then understand their dog's individual preferences,
Hmm. Or pigs.
whether that's through food or toys or access to spaces or activities,
Hmm.
and then use that to their advantage to build a different set of behavior.
So I see, I see. Wow. So you've really covered quite a lot of different things. And since dogs have different personalities and your oversight, your management, making sure everybody has their own space, do you mind if I
Mhm.
ask, what are your thoughts on taking a city dog who's very comfortable with streets and traffic and all that and putting them into the country or vice versa? Do they need some sort of training to make that transition? Is it the environment that they live in, or is it more the breed that's more country appropriate versus city appropriate?
And I think that's one of those things where we have breeds that are primarily considered country dogs
Hmm.
that do amazing in urban environments if their needs are met and they're taught how to do different behaviors. So
Hmm.
if you take an Australian Shepherd and you don't ever teach it anything and you put it into, downtown LA and you're trying to
Right.
walk it out of, your condo or your apartment down the street, there's a good
Yeah.
chance it's going to chase bicycles, skateboards, roller skates, small children,
Because of that
vehicles.
herding instinct that it has?
Yes.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
And so when we take a dog, whether it's in an urban environment or it's a rural environment, we want to make sure that we're preparing them for things that we're going to allow them to do ahead of time.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people who make that move from urban to rural, and they realize, like, hey, my dog never had these issues before. Now they want to go chase the neighbor's goats, or they want to go run the fence line with the neighbor's horses, and they're harassing them.
Okay.
Uh,
So what
there's
you're
a lot
saying,
of
so what you're saying is that whether it's a dog going from city to country or country to city, they need a little bit of socialization and training to help them
Yes,
make that transition successful.
exactly.
So could you tell me a little bit more about what All Big Canines offers as far as services and how do you handle people locally versus far? And tell us how we can get in touch with you.
So we are a partnership.
Hmm.
Myself and my business partner. We have a 5-acre training space here
Hmm.
in Sky Valley, which is about 18 minutes from Palm Springs.
Okay.
We have field spaces. So when we started this, it was more because we have big dogs, and there was nothing in our area for big dogs. The other
Okay.
thing we don't have a lot of is access to dog sport spaces. So you have
Uh-huh.
to drive an hour to an hour and a half in order to get to do barn hunt practice or go do it. There's one other agility field out here. It's run by a rescue. And it's not necessarily the same accessibility for all
But
people.
what you offer is agility
Yes.
training. You offer sports
Yep.
with
We
hunting,
have
like
we
fox.
have
Hmm.
we have agility classes. We
Hmm.
have rally obedience classes. We have trick training classes. We have one-on-one puppy classes, basic manners classes. We have a very early in the morning coffee and canines class. So for those people who want to go and enjoy the patios of restaurants with their dog, we prep them. So they are taught how to go to their mat on cue, how to have a mat next to the table, and how to handle their owner and people next to them, eating and drinking and being with other pets and other people before we take them out to an actual restaurant, because not having that type of practice can be very embarrassing.
I can understand. I can understand. So how do people get in touch with you?
So they can go to our website, which is All Big Canines spelled out, CANINES.
It'll be at the bottom of the screen.
And they can also call us or text us at 760-278-4248.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Isn't that a great conversation? So there's so much to consider when it comes to training a dog for your everyday countryside needs. Tabitha's insights, I think, were really valuable. So there's a naturalist named John Muir, and around 1913, he said, between every two pines is a doorway to a new world. So where will your doorway lead you? Are you about to start a new chapter in your life or take a step to train a pet? See where that path leads you, but one thing I urge you to do is take that first step, and I'll bet you the first step will be outside. So Tabitha's work reminds us of these doorways, that they exist because of the landscapes that we explore, the appreciation that we share for the nature around us. There's also relationships that we need to build. So these are building relationships either with our animal companions, but also with the humans that are around us. We want to build a bond with nature because it helps us to build a bond with our animals, which helps us to build a bond with our family and friends around us, and helps us to build a bond with a better community. So we all help each other as we move forward on this marvelous journey about embracing nature and the benefits and the lessons that it teaches us. It's all about connection. It's all about bonding. Each skill that we learn gives us more capability, and that capability helps us to train other people. So what we want to do is remember the lessons that we learned today to extend beyond just the countryside dogs. Learn those characteristics, those traits that we value as people. Things like patience, consistency, positive reinforcement. It applies to dog training, sure, but ultimately we can use those in our lives as well. We can strengthen the bond that we have with all of the people that we love and cherish. We want to leave traits that teach us to be patient with ourselves as well. Sometimes we're just a little too hard on ourselves, and we have to realize things happen. Let's just put a smile on our face and go with it. So if you live in the heart of a bustling city, or you're just out in the middle of the countryside, sprawling greenery for miles, then remember, the connection with nature and our animals and human companions is what makes us joyful and appreciate what a family really is. It's the people and the animals that we love in our friendship circles. And this is really what really enriches our lives. So I appreciate the time that you spent with me today. And thank you for letting me walk with you as we learned from All Big Canines and learned about Sky Valley, California. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you take a step outside to explore and cherish the connections around you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and make friends along the way. Until we bond again.